and look forward to hearing more. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Michael.
Right. Thank you, Chairman Wood. In 2010, CVIN was awarded an RB-TOP grant to construct a $75 million through 18 counties in Central California. So the NTI contribution was $46.6 million, and we also received $6 million from the CASF that was in its infancy at that time. The remaining funds in our company have come from private investments. This project provided new fiber-based infrastructure of 1,371 miles, including 720 miles of new construction. And while I appreciate Mr. Ort's line drawing, our network is much more extensive.
See, I always cheat him.
Yeah, well, we're not really competitors, but there we are. Working with Scenic, we provided dual 1 gigabit connection to each of the county offices of education in 18 counties, in addition to the Cal State universities, all the community colleges in our area, and the central libraries. We've already upgraded most of these connections to 10 gigabits based on need, and are planning to move some of these to 100 gigabits in the near future. This provides a significantly increased to over 19 counties and plus 19 anchor K-12 sites, totaling 988,000 students in 1,300 school districts. CVN has continued to deploy additional miles of broadband fiber after the grant through our serving territories. We've now connected an additional 65 school districts and additional community college locations, serving nearly 130,000 students, above and beyond the original grant construction. The bulk of these connections provide 1 gigabit to 10 gigabit service. So how do we close the digital divide in rural California? We have a couple of issues. The federal government is committed to closing the connectivity gap, has raised the E-rate spending cap, and has added additional funding into the E-rate program. As part of this, the USAC will contribute an additional 10% in rural areas. This would allow rural districts to potentially get affordable connection with potentially no out-of-pocket expenses. Unfortunately, it does not appear that California has made any funds available to take advantage of this added federal investment on the upfront construction cost. Historically, the California Teleconnect Fund does not pay any non-reoccurring portions for the school, but only a percentage of the recurring monthly rate after the E-rate discount is taken. Can the California Teleconnect Fund make this contribution? It would be terrible if California could not avail themselves of this additional money.
Do you mind if I ask? I'm just going to ask you a question. Is there? And I apologize for interrupting, but I want to understand this. Is there a structural reason that can't happen, or is there a rule that says that can't happen?
We don't know.
It's just not happen.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So, but no, traditionally they just don't do the upfront cost.
Got it.
See, what's as providers, we used to have to build that into the 5-year contract.
Right.
Now, and importantly, in leveraging federal and state money together, they're providing it all up front,
Okay.
as long as it's a reasonable cost.
Okay.
But we have not yet heard that the California Teleconnect Fund will contribute that 10%. If they bring in the 10%, then the USAC, the Universal Service Administrative Company, will actually kick in another 10%. So this is a pretty obvious thing that we could do,
Okay.
if it hasn't been done. Okay. So the example here is $2 million to extend fiber to a rural school district at 90% E-rate discount. USAC the feds would pay out $1.8 million, leaving $200,000 left. If CTF would come in with $100,000, then the E-rate program will come back in with another 10%. So this is something that's not clear what's going to happen here. Once fiber is in place, utilizing this education money, then CASF money looks more practical to go to to residences and smaller businesses. So this synergy of combining the two would be great. Programs such as CASF do provide a critical role, but even sometimes at the 70% grant level, it doesn't make sense. So, for example, just off of Digital 395, the race communications people got a grant, and it was $13,000 per household. Mm-hmm. That's great. That's a great number. But if I was at 60 or 70% and I still had $4,000 left to pull out of my pocket, and I was to provide a reasonable broadband connection under that scenario, let's say $49.95 a month or $29.95, it would take a long time to recover that money. And that's presuming we could get usually rule of thumb in this business is 50% in a non-served area, 50% acceptance. That would be good. But still, if you pencil it out, you're talking 11 to 14 years to recover if you factor in maintenance costs. The fact is we did great in 2010 and 2011. What we really need to do is that last 5 or 8% or 18%, whatever number you want to choose, it's going to be really expensive. And the programs are not currently set up to handle that kind of expense. The other problem we have as providers is to get things done in the most cost-efficient manner. Usually when we approach counties, cities, we get a great acceptance at the executive level. But when we get down to the public works level, we often see that the public works people and the permitting agencies see this as a way to fund certain civic improvements. And typically they're sidewalk improvements we've been charged for, extensive street repaving issues. These exorbitant fees not only come in to provide a problem with getting projects done, but it just threatens the project's viability. Many cities and counties that continue to rely on outdated standards and specifications that may have been developed years ago. Caltrans, we did a lot of work with on our last projects. They were very agreeable, but they were still applied to outdated standards. So if you decide to put a 1 1/4 inch pipe in, they're looking at standards that really reflect a 30-inch sewer pipe, a 40-inch water main. So we're going to have to bury it 10 feet down. So we are always continuously asking for exceptions when the standard throughout the rest of the state is 36 inches down. It's hard. Almost all the equipment that we use in this light-duty utility construction is designed for 30 to 36 inches. And I can't tell you how much time and money we have spent in the last 3 years in getting exceptions in order that we could actually apply and get the stuff done at a reasonable rate, at a predictable rate. When you apply for a grant, you want to say, you want to know that your costs are predictable. And that's often been a problem. Yeah, so if we could modernize the standards at Caltrans to something that would really reflect this industry's needs and also protect the roadways, which they're very interested in, we'd be making a lot of progress.
Do you mind if I ask another question?
Sure.
And part of it is I'm still relatively new in this job, so I'd like to know the changing the standards. Does that have to be from within Caltrans? Does that be a legislative fix? I mean, and maybe you can't answer that question, but it's certainly a question I'm going to go back and ask.
Caltrans has 3 different guides that they use, and they're often contradictory. Okay, so there's 2 things that we worry about, and I'll even let Mike jump in here if you want. First of all, we don't want to go down 48 or 60 inches.
Right.
The next thing is how close to the roadway we can be. So in our project, we spent an extra $1 million in Tuolumne County because someone in Caltrans decided we should move additional 20 feet out. So rather than being near the roadway, we understand it's a factor in this business that we occasionally get a fiber hit. But if it's down 36 or 40 inches, you're probably not going to be. No, these are standard books, often off of the federal highway standards that Caltrans triggers also. But I don't think it just needs a legislative fix.
Okay.
If I could jump in there, 2 things I guess I'd point out is there's no consistency. A lot of it has to do with personalities you're dealing with. And it's the personalities between just Caltrans and also some of the counties, the people doing the inspections and so forth. They have their own opinions. And when we went into Nevada, for example, we had to negotiate. They wanted us 20 feet deep, paralleling roads. And I actually had to escalate that to Senator Reed. And so that got fixed. But they define that as a parallel drainage. It was a trench. Okay, it was a dirt trench. The other thing that we found is, so we got, and it's not just Caltrans, it's the agencies. You have different personalities that have different motivations, and they have different knowledge. And so they try to do their very best when it comes to broadband to extrapolate from experiences they have elsewhere. So when we were doing environmental studies, the only experience that a lot of them had in their careers in that area were basically road realignments. So they wanted us to follow the same kind of environmental processes that they did with road realignments when all we were doing was putting a 6-inch trench in. that was 36 or 48 inches deep. So as we learn more, we want to make sure that the other agencies in Caltrans, and I'm seeing this happen, by the way, when I've talked to other districts, they'll go and there'll be a learning process from one region. And by the time we finished our project, I have to say that the requirements were a lot less relaxed than they were at the beginning. So there is a learning curve. We just need to make it more universal and get an understanding of what is the real threat to the roadway and what are the rules we should follow. And quite honestly, I'm going to throw one other thing out. The right-of-ways along the roadways in Caltrans are already disturbed areas. They should be declared categorical exempt from environmental studies, unless maybe they have they cross a marsh or a wetlands or some special thing. We know the protocols are standard. The mitigation protocols are very, very standard. It's like a lookup chart, and we should be able to apply those. There's tremendous amount of waste that's spent negotiating everything as if it's a unique new process that nobody's ever seen before.
So bottom line, there are no standards for deployment of broadband.
No.
No.
They really look at it as a steel pipe in the ground, as drainage, as Mike just said.
Yeah, drainage as opposed to a sprinkler system.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
That's a problem. Or the disturbed aspect of it is also important because, often if we're pushed to the edge of a right-of-way, or whoever a permitting agency it is, now we're in a environmentally sensitive area. If we were, say, 6 feet off the pavement, we're in a disturbed area that's been disturbed sometimes over 100 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and we ended up paying $4 million for mitigation for the desert tortoise. And we negotiated finally between the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Caltrans to be very much adjacent to the highway. There wasn't any takes, there was no harassment or deaths of any desert tortoises. But we ended up buying like 400 acres of land somewhere for a habitat elsewhere to offset this damage, whatever we did along that road.
Wow. Thank you. And I apologize, David. We're
okay.
going through here, I'm just
We're now at the important
my wheels
stuff.
are spinning.
We
So
start going into our post-stress syndrome, don't we? On these
You remember every day.
I'll bet you do. So please, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, not much more to say other than CVIN does work with, we are in cooperation with a number of cities, City of Clovis, City of Fresno, City of Shafter, in helping them manage networks. So we do continue a public-private partnership. We've used some of our money to expand networks. They've allowed us access to the networks. And CVI thinks it's a good citizen with good money. We're looking forward for other opportunities. And thanks for the opportunity.
Wow. Well, thank you. Actually going to go through some things as I'm thinking about this, but takeaways, and this is, we've heard this before. This continues to come up. The silos for funding were just absolutely mind-boggling from my perspective, and the whole concept of long-term investments versus short-term. I come from the private sector before I came here, and my focus was always long-term. And so I'm not looking from year to year how this is going to affect my budget. I'm looking for what's going to happen 5 years from now, and how do we make something work? How do we compel, or how do we encourage agencies and government to think a little differently is something I hope to be able to continue to work on while I'm here. The permitting. Did you say $54 million?
54 agencies.
Oh, sorry. Okay, that's almost worse, actually.
Yeah, we only spent $27 million.
For permitting. So
permitting, right away,
okay.
And the environmental studies.
Okay.
The whole
okay.
thing.
So in our $66 million project, we probably spent between 12 and 14 million. And there's lots of ways they get you, because it's not only the actual permit itself, it's ongoing inspection fees for something that's not a big deal to construct.
Right.
And other things and the coordination also between different agencies over the same piece of ground can be very expensive, because they won't allow you to even though you've mobilized and you place the equipment there, unless all three agencies can be represented on site on the day you start. They'll cancel, and that'll be a week.
Wow.
There's another factor too. I think that there's an unholy alliance between the consulting firms that do the environmental studies, the agencies that are, that are actually the benefit, the people that get and so what happens is there's a feedback mechanism. The consultants want to get the deal. They want to get the agreement, the FONSI or whatever the case may be, the negative declaration, CEQA. And so there's a tendency to continually raise the bar. And in continually raising the bar, it sets a precedent for something else later. And a lot of times, the negotiations need to be a little bit more aggressive. And like I said before, it turns out after I learned through the whole process, the protocols are very standard. We know how to avoid a desert tortoise. We know how to avoid, a grassland. We know how to do all these things, but you would think that it's never been done before. And it costs a lot of money to go through those negotiations and with time. Nobody wants to destroy the environment. We want to be very careful, and it's just that it's just a process that needs work on.
How much did you get for the projects we were talking about? Did you get a lot of pushback? Did you get challenges on CEQA? Did you get around these projects?
We in the Eastern Sierra, I had no intervention except for an attorney that wanted us to do secondary and tertiary implications of what more traffic would be imposed in 80 years as more people moved into the area because they now had broadband. It was a kind of a lame, and the commission basically did this. So there was nothing, we worked very closely with the Sierra Club and the Mono Lake Committee, and we worked with them up front very well. And I think once you engage everybody and they do understand what broadband actually means, and you remind them that they use broadband to communicate with each other and organize, they're actually quite, they have a very enlightened view of broadband.
Yeah. I would say that we, for example, once we gave our CEQA, our FONSI, which is the federal state CEQA, to Caltrans, they took 6 months to review it, even though it was already granted.
6 months?
To review it. And then when we got to the district level, we had each individual review it again.
And that took how long?
6 months to 18 months, depending on the district office.
Our biggest challenge was not biology, it was cultural. We spent $17 million addressing the cultural issues on the Eastern Sierra. Keep in mind that the Native American population has existed in that area for about 13,000 years. There are artifacts all over the place. Some of them are just flakes used from making arrowheads. But because of the way the feds wrote the spec on how we needed to do our work, we had to avoid areas that whenever there was some discovery of a shard or something like that. And that area has been an area of migration for many, many, many thousands of years. When you get to the Digital 299 project, that whole roadway was etched out of the side of a cliff. So, we're pretty confident that we're not going to have those issues there. And in your farmland where you guys were, those areas were already well disturbed.
We did not have a lot of cultural, but we did have a biological problem. We have a lot of species on the floor of the valley that we had to avoid. You had kit foxes and things like that. So.
Interesting. The whole concept of the iBank is a new one to me. Very interested in the possibility of looking into that. And I understand there are significant resources there that could be maybe brought to bear to help upfront costs of some of these networks, and so that would.
The iBank has a lot of promise. It has a promise to help support working capital while the programs are in place. The grants can provide the basic equity that's needed to secure those working capital grants. We also believe, though, that the iBank may have, and I'm just guessing here, could have some solution relative to the silo, if we can work the silos, because it's all about timing and things like that. But to move a project forward, if we can modify maybe some of the rules that the iBank has, I believe that they would be very interested in facilitating this kind of infrastructure.
Interesting. I'm going to go back to, I made a note here. Sorry. So, now both of you have alluded to this, that the first several years of a network being up and running are absolutely critical, and things are somewhat fragile with regard to that. I think, Michael, you referred to property tax burden and being a significant part of that. Now, the property tax, business property tax, that goes to counties or cities, or does it go to state as well?
It actually goes. Look, I'm not a tax expert.
Me neither.
I do know this, that it's worked through the Board of Equalization.
Okay.
Because we actually cross multiple counties. Is
Yeah,
that what happens?
that's right.
Yeah.
They have a utility division to tax utilities.
Apportionment.
They tax
Different.
PG&E. They tax everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the agency that we work with.
Okay.
And in the case of the grants that we had, in case of the BTOP grants, basically the entire grant was capitalized by the nature of it work. And by the way, not all of the states in California tax utilities and tax especially telecommunications.
I'm sorry, you said not all the states in California.
I'm sorry,
we only
not
have
all
one that I
states
know
in
of.
the United States.
Thank you. Okay, good.
Sorry about that. It's my understanding, and I don't quote. Well, I shouldn't say it if I can't be quoted, but I believe that somewhere in the order of about 13 to 15 states in the union actually have taxes for telecommunications.
Okay. So I guess one of the things I'm going to look into is where does this property tax go, and so what I could imagine. For example, in my own business. I know I paid a business property tax every year. I paid it to the county, so I don't know where it went. Quite frankly, after that, but if I know that counties and cities are certainly strapped for cash, and so the thought that they might be giving something up could be problematic. But it's a short term. It's a short term potential sacrifice for a much broader long-term gain. So I guess in my mind I'd be looking at, okay, if cities or counties or the state is going to give up something, that there's some sort of an offset that makes it somewhat, not necessarily revenue neutral, but some sort of an incentive that says, maybe this is a really good thing for us. So.
And in the rural areas, we operate on a lot of federal land. We U.S. Forest Services, we operate in BLM and so forth, and we just got our friendly annual increase from the BLM on the use fee, the special use fee, and it's kind of ironic because the president just recently had a broadband committee that crossed many agencies in Washington to figure out how to promote broadband, and about 3 weeks later we get a bill to increase those rates. And I think one of the other agencies, it might have been the Forest Service, wanted to actually have some kind of a use tax that would be tied to like a revenue share. And so you're trying to build infrastructure for the community benefit, and yet at the same time, there's a bit of a tapping into the growth.
So I'd like to ask another question, and then we'll kind of move on to our next. But that's, you both brought this up, and talking about deployment and how there really aren't any standards for what you're doing, because everything's based on that. And I go back to thinking of, and yes, we seem to be working on old standards in general. I think of flood control with the Army Corps in my district, where water releases are based on manuals that were created in the 50s, and not using technology that's now available to us to accurately forecast, and we're working in hopefully in a positive direction, but that's almost glacial in the speed in which we're able to move. But so if we were looking at standards around deployment, and this is a question I don't know who to ask. I mean, who should be setting this? Is this something? Should this be through the Commissioner Sandoval, maybe you can answer this. Maybe this should be through PUC, somewhere where we could have a specific set of standards that are, for this industry, that are not reliant on old data and trying to interpret something that isn't really relevant to what we're doing. So, any thoughts on that?
Well, there are various geotechnical engineers, for example, that do consult with Caltrans. We hired one of them in our project. And I hired him to make one calculation on one piece of paper that was going to save us $2.5 million. When we bored under a freeway overpass, surface street freeway overpass, They've asked that, and we're going to put in 1.25 inches, they've asked us to survey that intersection for the next 10 years to see if it's going to go up. I hired a guy from the U.S. Geodesic Survey, the head of the laboratory, who also works for Caltrans, to do one piece of calculations that says, you don't need to survey over 1.25 inch conduit bored down at 5 feet across under a surface road that's maintained by the county. But they really wanted 4-point surveys. You can hire these people. We would pay for it, actually, because it saves us that much money.
Wow. Wow.
We have a litany of agencies that kind of have their own unique logic. The Army Corps of Engineers designated the Mojave River as a navigable waterway. Has anybody been to the Mojave River?
Yeah.
Yeah. With your boat?
Not in a boat, no, I'm afraid not.
And then because it wasn't based on logic, we also had a number of agencies that the other one that I think California could look at, and we had a great relationship with them, and they really worked well with us, was the State Lands Commission. The State Lands Commission has spots of land all over the place, not just under the San Francisco Bay and under the rivers. They actually have parcels that were given by the railroads over the years for schools throughout the state. And we actually had to dig our network 10 miles out of the way to avoid it, to avoid a 1,200-foot section. So I think if we can work on some of these kind of arcane protocols, I think we can make some headway. And they even understand that it doesn't make sense. Okay. So.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate this. I do want to, before you guys can head off, but one of the things that we do know, we'd asked Congressman Huffman to be here today, or someone from his office to kind of represent. He has a bill that he's introduced, and he represents the same rural areas that I represent. So he's introduced the Rural Broadband Infrastructure Investment Act, H.R. 4160, which would provide new opportunities for broadband deployment in rural communities across the nation. So hopefully we'll get somewhere with that. His legislation builds on the Rural Electrification Act that was introduced during FDR's era, which brought power and telephone service to rural communities during the New Deal. And as we know, broadband's critical to the potential economic vitality of rural communities, and the lack is a great hindrance to economic growth. So it would this would increase eligibility for rural communities to receive about $670 million in federal broadband financing through the Rural Utilities and Service Telecommunication Infrastructure Loan and Guarantee Grant Program. That's a big, long title. It would allow the rural utility service flexibility to support promising projects by removing certain non-duplication requirements, and will also increase overall service. So, to the tune of about $25 to $50 million annually. So, I'm pleased to support him on this. We will be partnering on this and other issues going forward. But hopefully there's some things out there that are coming. And we were very fortunate to have our bill AB 1262 signed by the governor that brought $5 million into the Rural Regional Broadband Consortia account, which will help for the next couple of years to keep some of those going. So I thank you very much for your efforts in being here. And these are not problems that are going to be solved short term. They're going to be long-term solutions. So thank you very, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
And I know Commissioner Sandoval has another meeting, so I don't want to, and I know she needs to be out of here at 10:50. Is that correct?
11 is fine.
Oh, okay.
The meeting has been moved over here. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that's kind. Good. So, and then Robert, come on up too. So.